We're going to look at how to make a grid on this photograph of Abraham Lincoln here. I could use this form of grid if I wanted to reproduce this picture in a larger or smaller size. Grids make it easy to scale an image. I can also use it for my distortion grid. Also, I want to point out to you, this is a picture that I got off Google. You can see it's got this little watermark on it, which I'm not going to copy. We can use reference images off of Google, but that's because I'm using this for practice. If I wanted to do this and really call it my work, I would have to use my own original photograph. We need to be very conscious of copyright. So let's look at how to make a grid. I start out by measuring my image. I really recommend that you use 8 by 10 images because it gives you enough detail to see when you're drawing. This one's pretty close to that. It's about 9.5 by 7.25. I'm going to make 1-inch squares here, just because that's easier to do than some other sizes. So let's go ahead and mark that, and I'm going to make marks at every inch along one side, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now we want these to be squares, so whatever I mark on one side, I have to use that same measurement system on the other side, or I'm not going to get perfect squares. So let's mark this way. Another option for you, and you can, kind of depends on what materials you have. Another option for doing this is to make a grid on clear plastic, like a sheet protector, and then you can make it with a permanent marker, and you can just slip your picture in there, and it saves a lot of time if you do this frequently. Okay, I made my marks on both sides, so then I can just connect those lines and keep them straight. Grids have been used for centuries by many artists as an aid to help with proportion and with scale. And so it's really not cheating to use a grid, it's just time consuming to do this every time. And you want to try and build your observation skills where you don't have to do this every time. But if you're doing something like a portrait, it can be helpful to work from a grid. It also is just a time-saving measure. Oops, I can make marks up here. 1 inch. And notice I'm starting from the same side every time, so that way it'll match up at the bottom. And then what you're going to do is on your paper, you will, on the drawing paper that you're going to use, you're going to create a grid as well, but you can make those squares larger or smaller, and that will scale your paper up and down with exactly the same proportions. I'm going to also show you how to do this using a bright window as a light table so that you don't have to draw the grid directly on your paper. So now we have created our grid. And to help you keep the squares in order, it's helpful to number these along the bottom. Okay, and then this one would be 8. And then to use letters or some other method along, use letters along the side so that each square has a designated spot. This will help you keep your grid straight when you start to transfer.